When it comes to RPGs, the setting that you pick is going to have a pretty big impact on the story that you tell. And that's not to say that every setting can only tell one story, right? You can have a fun, pun-filled, zany, off-the-wall Star Wars game, or a gritty reality of war and struggles of the Alliance kind of Star Wars game. But what setting you pick is going to make certain expectations in the head of both the GM and the players. We're going to play a game in Azeroth means a different thing than we're going to play a game in Middle-earth, despite the fact that they're both high fantasy kind of settings. If you want to be a goblin player character in Azeroth, that's no big deal because they are capable of being the good guys and are part of the good guys story. I want to be a goblin in Middle-earth means something different because they're aligned with the antagonist, and they're not expected to be in the typical adventuring party. I want to be a wizard in Azeroth is no big deal because there's wizards and warlocks and rangers and priests and everyone throwing magic everywhere. I want to be a wizard in Middle-earth means something different because it's normally reserved for Gandalf and Radagast and Saruman and these almost demigod level people who are wielding powers that are outside the reach of the standard adventuring group. Today's topic is going to be about settings, and the two questions that I have is, what is your favorite setting and what do you like about it? And what is a campaign setting that you've always wanted to try but haven't necessarily got to play in yet? So for my favorite campaign setting, I'm going to be lame and pick Forgotten Realms, and that's not because of what Forgotten Realms does, but because of what it's capable of doing. Forgotten Realms is a great campaign setting because it just has so much stuff that's been, built into it over the years that anything you want to do, there is a place in there that you can make it work. And no matter where you're using for the story, the player characters can be from somewhere else to fit what they have in their backstory. If you are playing Tomb of Annihilation in the jungles of Cholt and it's a survival crawl through the jungle fighting zombies kind of game, but the character that a player has in mind is more of an urban bounty hunter kind of urchin character that grew up on the streets pickpocketing and really knows how to navigate crowds, well, it's not too much work to just say, well, there's no big cities around here, but you can be from Waterdeep or Neverwinter or Baldur's Gate, and you were hired to come here and do this thing. That's exactly how Tomb of Annihilation starts, is characters from anywhere else are hired to come to this place and do something. On top of that, no matter what you're doing in Forgotten Realms, you can have the story kind of wander off its path and go to other places. And then you can pull from wikis and books and modules and a million online resources to kind of fill in the gaps until you find your way. If your team is playing Storm King's Thunder and they decide that they're not really digging the official module and they find themselves in Tribor or Neverwinter or wherever, you can pull from the modules and kind of fill in those spots with side quests and stuff while working on whatever your next main story arc's going to be. If the group finds themselves in Cholt and not really feeling Tomb of Annihilation, well, they can catch a boat and head up the Sword Coast and kick off a nautical pirate adventure, right? You can then use a million resources to fill in the gaps until you get them to Waterdeep or Luskan or wherever you want to take them so that your story that you're going to tell can kick off. So whether I'm a player or a character, I just really enjoy the setting because there's just so much stuff that I can draw from, and I never feel that I'm in a rush to create content because I can beg, borrow, and steal while working on the side to make whatever's going to work. For a campaign setting that I've always wanted to try but haven't got to do, I'm going to pick Karthun, Lands of Conflict by D20 Monkey or Brian Patterson. And what it is Brian Patterson and Tracy Barnett, who make up Exploding Rogue Studios, did a Kickstarter for Brian Patterson's homebrew campaign setting that he's kind of been sprinkling through his D20 Monkey comics over the last several years. The Kickstarter was successful, and it's now a printed book. I have the book. I have just not got to play there yet. It is system neutral, which means if you want to play it in Fate or Genesis or D&D or whatever, then you can do that. And it's a really interesting setting. And on top of that, because Brian Patterson is an artist, it has gorgeous artwork throughout the entire book. And I really like the way it's written. I like the way it's worked. I like the way it is full of art. And it's just such an interesting setting because it may be high fantasy, but it's also this really gritty kind of dark intrigue because the world is constantly on the brink of falling, of destruction by the world fire. And it takes a lot of high fantasy tropes and does them differently. For instance, the gods walk on the mortal plane, the material plane with mortals, right? So they are walking among their followers and affecting the way that wars and history and stuff is done because the gods are actually on the plane with people and not on some other plane of existence or, figures up in the sky that no one ever interacts with except for clerics. They are there and they are affecting things. On top of that, magic works differently because wizards aren't using magic because they read a book and spent their entire life studying in a library, and sorcerers didn't just wake up one day and had an event happen and suddenly they could cast magic. Magic comes from binding elementals to the caster, right? So you have the spells that you have because some elemental force is bound to you and you are drawing from that power, not unlike the way that a warlock draws from their patron. So it's a really different and more unique way for magic to work, and I really like spellcasters and like magic, so I like things that come at magic from a different angle than the typical. Another interesting thing is the planet has 3 moons, and there are 3 elven tribes. They're represented by wolf, bear, and jackal, and depending on the phases of the different moons, the different tribes get boons. They get faster and stronger and stuff like that when it is their turn. Their moon is currently in effect. So if the moon that the wolf tribe is tied to is in effect, all of the members of the wolf tribe are stronger, faster, better, and they Daft Punk, and they celebrate their time, their boon, different ways. So the wolf tribe celebrates by having hunts through the wilderness and tracking down great beasts and this big ceremonial kind of hunt, whereas the bear tribe does like gladiatorial combat and feats of strength and almost these like Olympic style games to drink and share in the revelry and just enjoy that it is their month or their phase of the moon rather. And then the jackal tribe revels in theirs by doing skirmishes on the other clans and playing tricks and stuff like that. And so it's interesting to have elves not be this like aloof hoity-toity fantasy kind of egotistical race and have them be more lively, right? They're drinking and they're doing gladiatorial combat and they're almost barbaric in their like shamanistic rituals based on which tribe they're in. So the book is great. I have it off the Kickstarter. It's a gorgeous book and it is thick. So it is not a small supplement. It has everything from the Pantheon. It has the history of the world in there. Tons of art, like I said. It breaks down the way that all the races that you would expect, human, elf, dwarf, gnome, all your fantasy races, it breaks down how they work in the setting and even has a custom race in there. And the book actually even has an adventure in the back so that you can get straight into the world without having to write something, and it is ready to go. So I will link to their Kickstarter so that you can see their version of spinning the, their elevator pitch, as well as check out the book. but just something I've always wanted to do and just haven't had the chance. So those are my answers, and I really want to hear what everyone else's answers are. If you are a GM or a storyteller who is working on your own custom campaign setting, I am too, and I want to hear what you are putting into your campaign setting, and I want to know why those things interest you, and I want to know how you're kind of doing it. Are you using emerging firearms? Which ways are you doing it, and why is that something that interests you? Are there airships in your setting? Why? How does magic work in your setting? So hit me up in the comments, ping me on Twitter, message me on Reddit, whatever it takes. I want to hear your answers, and I want to hear kind of your thoughts and stories from your table.